So I'm Parker Lewis, working on Zaprite. We're working on Bitcoin payments. If I'd say that Kevin and Lightspark are working on a big, heavy infrastructure project, we're really kind of focusing on business applications and getting businesses enabled to accept Bitcoin payment. First, why I'm working on Zaprite and Bitcoin payments. About 3 years ago, I took a step back from Unchained, where I formerly worked on Bitcoin custody, and was working on my book. And it was in that early part of 2023 when there were a slew of bank failures. Um, Silicon Valley Bank, Silvergate, Credit Suisse, First Republic, Signature Bank. And it heightened the focus in my own mind of this thought that just kept permeating, which was, what would you do if reliable access to your traditional bank account wasn't there? The first thing that happened when those bank failures happened was people thinking about, how do I make payroll? There were a ton of businesses that worked for Silicon Valley Bank, and over that weekend, there was a lot of uncertainty. But banks are ultimately the rails, the end rails for the US payment system and really the global payment system. And that is how you access your customers, typically receiving revenue to banks. So just as the questions of how am I going to make payroll, the next logical question is, how do I receive my revenue? How do I get access to my customers if my reliable access to my bank is cut off? The other thing I was working at the time was my book, and I wanted to be paid in Bitcoin, and what I thought should exist didn't exist. And John, founder and CEO of Zaprite, was closest to the vision that both myself and Will Cole had, and we approached John and ultimately joined him very early on, just over 2 years ago. So it was ultimately, and I think that is a big consistent theme that you'll hear from speakers of, they have this initiative to create something. Kevin was talking about how while he had COVID, sitting in bed thinking about Lightning and that, how to make it work better. For me, it was needing to satisfy my own need, and Mike talked about how people don't tell you what to do in Bitcoin. There's no CEO, there's no central party, there's an incentive to build, and I wanted the next thing that I built to be Bitcoin payments. The way I think about Bitcoin and Bitcoin payments is that first somebody has to understand why Bitcoin will store value, that it's fixed supply, it's a censorship resistant property. Those two things go hand in hand. But once you start to understand why Bitcoin stores value, if you run a business, or even if you're an individual that is a key cog in a business, or just an individual yourself, once you understand the importance of Bitcoin's fixed supply, it becomes very logical and intuitive that accepting Bitcoin directly is the most efficient and most effective way to acquire Bitcoin. It's the cheapest way than accepting fiat and then converting it to Bitcoin. The way I see this going, and not everyone in the Bitcoin community agrees with me, is that there are really three key roles of money. You'll typically hear them as store of value, medium of exchange, unit of account. I kind of think of it a little bit differently, which is a reserve asset, what you hold on your balance sheet, a payment currency, what you're actually using to settle, and a pricing unit, what you actually price things in. And in the past, it was dollar for all three. Dollar for the reserve asset, which you store in your bank account, dollar the payment currency, dollar is the pricing unit. Today, as people are adopting Bitcoin, it is typically Bitcoin being used as a store of value, dollars being used as payment rails, and dollars as the pricing unit. We will shift into the next phase, which is what we're working on at Zaprite, which is those people who've started to save in Bitcoin, they get further down the line, they run a business, they want to accept it as a payment currency. The way that works is you still price things in dollars, and at that moment, Bitcoin is used as the payment rail, and Bitcoin actually settles, and the person has Bitcoin. Where we're going in the future is that Bitcoin will be all three. I view this as water moving downhill, which is that Bitcoin will not only be a store of value, it will not only be used as a rail to facilitate payments, it will actually be what people price things in. That is our vision for the future at Zaprite, and that's how we build. We build with this realization that dollars exist today and people need to leverage dollars, but they're in this shift over to Bitcoin, and in the future, everything's going to be priced in some unit of Bitcoin. The gas at the gas station, the ribeyes at the grocery store, going to see your doctor. It's actually going to be denominated in a unit of Bitcoin. And the way that we get there is by individuals and merchants accepting Bitcoin as payment. People have different perspectives on this, but the way that we think about it at Zaprite, when you think about the layers of Bitcoin payment rails, you have the protocol layer, the base chain layer 1, you have Lightning, which is a protocol, you have Fediment, you have Arc. We just heard from Kevin Hurley talking about Spark as a protocol. The service Lightspark, where they power Coinbase, we think about that as a transactional layer. Like, you need wallets to support Lightning, you need wallets to support on-chain, and you need nodes. So you have a network of custodial applications and non-custodial nodes. We view the commerce layer as being distinct from that it is most natural to build Bitcoin payments in a way where payments is actually a specialty. Oftentimes, when people hear Bitcoin payments, they think that that's synonymous with Lightning, and that's not how we think. Lightning is a rail, but in order to affect commerce, whether that's B2C payments or peer-to-peer payments, you actually need commerce applications to be built on the ultimate transaction rails. That's what we're working on. These are obviously not the only examples of people that it's more there to help you conceptualize. In terms of the market opportunity, in 2023, the global payment volume just on Visa and MasterCard was 21.3 trillion, and that was across 356 billion transactions. In our view, my personal view, all global payments are going to shift to Bitcoin. They're going to start with merchants and business owners that understand Bitcoin. In order to make Bitcoin not just a medium of exchange, but get to that end state of being the pricing unit and being a unit of account, it's important to understand that the Bitcoin rails, those transactional layers, they must be built out to commerce. And that functionally means every different industry, whether it be retail, whether it be healthcare, whether it be how you might settle an oil transaction or gas at a pipeline or gas at the gas station. Each of those are different industries. It might be real estate, how you facilitate an escrow transaction. And in order for merchants to adopt Bitcoin, you have to meet them where they are. And that's where this commerce layers comes in, about building the tools that they're used to using in the fiat side into Bitcoin so that you can meet businesses where they are. But it's not just every industry. Like, each industry interacts with money differently than others. Like real estate, the way that real estate is settled is different than the way if you go down to a coffee shop, you buy something, which is different than how you settle oil trades or car transactions, buying a car and having transaction or title shift. So the way that Bitcoin becomes the dominant global currency is through a physical process of people building the tools. But another half of the equation is the actual way that people interface with money. So it might be a point of sale. It might be an e-commerce website. It might be a bill pay. It might be tap to pay, or it might be invoices. That each of those represent a different way that businesses take payment. And we're in the very inception of Bitcoin being built out to all forms of commerce and all payment systems, but that requires work and capital. But as Bitcoin is built out to those, it becomes better money. My view of this is that Bitcoin derives its value through exchange. Today, that's largely facilitated between Bitcoin and dollars. Not every trade creates the same amount of value. The more that Bitcoin facilitates direct commerce, the more value will accrue to Bitcoin, the currency. So I wouldn't say that our approach is necessarily unique, but we view it as the right market structure. What do? We focus on Bitcoiners. We're not in the business. We'll support anybody. But I told you before, first you have to understand why Bitcoin stores value for you to be a logical adopter of Bitcoin payments. We're not going to find people who have no understanding of Bitcoin to say, you should accept Bitcoin as payments. Some people do that. We think it's the wrong strategy. If people don't understand Bitcoin, they don't understand the volatility, why it stores value. They might be sold that it's cheaper or faster, but ultimately they will be disappointed. The sales won't show up. They won't know how to communicate to the $2 trillion of Bitcoin holders to convince them that their service is worthy enough to part with their sats. The Bitcoiners are the logical people to adopt Bitcoin payments first. In order to help individuals and businesses accept Bitcoin, we create a bridge between Bitcoin and fiat. That's not conversion. On the right, I've got an example of our checkout where you can easily accept Bitcoin on-chain, Lightning, card. That unified checkout to not have a disjointed payment experience is critical to convincing somebody that would otherwise adopt Bitcoin payments to do it, because no one's going to sacrifice their fiat rails. And if we can control the experience, we can actually drive Bitcoin payments, and that's how we create value for our customers. I mentioned before, people oftentimes think of Bitcoin payments as synonymous with Lightning. The mempool recently cleared. Transactions were one sat for VBI. On-chain final settlement is a great way for people to take payment. If you think about, we're not talking about $5 coffee purchases. We're talking about somebody invoicing $5,000, $10,000. On-chain payments work great for that. And people oftentimes, when they work on Bitcoin payments, they skip right past on-chain. The majority of the transactions that we help facilitate are Lightning transactions, but the majority of the value is on-chain. If you were to think about how a real estate transaction might get done, someone buying a $100,000 home, $500,000 home, fiat inflation, sorry. That was a Freudian slip. That's an on-chain payment. So both on-chain and Lightning are important. Importantly, we're not building a wallet. We're focused on the payment experience. We're focused on the commerce, connecting the buyer to the seller. If we tried to be both a wallet and a platform specialized on payments, we'd have a worse platform for payments and we'd have a worse wallet. So we're hyper specialized specifically on payments, and we view those two things, that the right way to build Bitcoin payments is to have that specialization. People already custody Bitcoin. They already trust certain ways to do that, whether that's a non-custodial wallet, a non-custodial Lightning node, or something like Strike or something like Coinbase. If you've already figured out how you want to store your Bitcoin, whether it's on chain, you shouldn't have to pass your money through an entity like Zaprite just to get it. So we help disintermediate the processing of that. We also have tools to drive Bitcoin payments. If you see here, it's a little bit small, but we got TVs. That one of the important things to drive Bitcoin payments is to give the merchants tools. You can put a 3% premium on all fiat currency transactions. We don't allow you to put premiums and discounts on methods of payments, but you can communicate to every customer that you actually prefer Bitcoin. Rather than just having a Bitcoin preferred sign in your store, you give the economic trade-off to every customer that comes through your door. And that's what drives Bitcoin payments. The way that we deliver value is not simply by giving access to Bitcoin payments, but helping merchants drive actual transactions and savings on the Bitcoin side. Strategically, we build native templates. We don't plan to build templates for every form of commerce, but where there's opportunity to create a template ourselves to allow an exceptional buyer experience, we do that. And then we integrate to third-party platforms as opportunities see fit. Importantly, though, the way that we deliver value is by actually helping people not just have that option, but to increase their volume. And if we're thinking about integrating into a third-party platform, if that platform doesn't care about Bitcoin, those merchants aren't going to drive Bitcoin sales, and our ability to deliver value is impaired. So we really focus on not just the enablement, but the actual fulfillment of value. And that's predicated on our ability to deliver a great experience for Bitcoin. Now, why do we focus on Bitcoiners? The world is our oyster, and very few people understand Bitcoin. 99% of those very few people that understand Bitcoin are the logical people to adopt Bitcoin payments first. That is where the logical connection is. We think about building the solutions that Bitcoiners need because they are the signal. if we build the applications that someone that is fiat minded, that is really adopting Bitcoin payments because they just want to convert to fiat, they aren't really the signal for what product to build. The Bitcoiners are. And we know, because we understand Bitcoin, that everyone's going to where the Bitcoiners are. So we're skating to where the puck's going to be, not where it is. And what our goal is at Zaprite is to grow the market through that process, making it easy for the Bitcoiners that do understand Bitcoin to turn on Bitcoin payments in their business. One of the things I will, impress upon you guys in this audience is that if you're one of those people, you should make a priority of that. That will help reinforce the security of your business, and it will help promote the Bitcoin network. Where do we focus in terms of customers? Bitcoin-centric businesses. That is the epicenter. The businesses that are offering services to Bitcoiners. Bitcoin custody solutions, Bitcoin miners, wallets, people that are hosting Bitcoin events. They have the distribution to people where you have this natural overlap of willing buyers and sellers in Bitcoin. They're the most logical place to start. The next most logical place to start is Bitcoiners that own businesses. One thing that I've learned at Zaprite, but it's also logical, that if very few people in the world understand Bitcoin, some subset of those are business owners, and they're in all different industries. We can't be everything to all people. So we focus on those, but we think about the templates where we can deliver the most value and the most operational leverage. Typically, it's small businesses. If you think about a public company board, it's hard to get, if 1% of the population understands Bitcoin, it's hard to get 50% of a corporate board to understand Bitcoin. If there's a guy who runs a dentist's office, we got Rick back here. He understands Bitcoin. He can make the unilateral decision to accept Bitcoin payments, and he does. That's where we're focused. We have to focus logically where we can meet those type of business owners, and that's what we do. This is an example. This is our product vision for Bitcoiners. I mentioned we're not a wallet, but when you come into Zaprite, you can connect a Bitcoin hardware wallet like a Cold Card Ledger or Trezor. Again, receiving payments directly to cold storage without it first coming to Zaprite. Or if you're a Strike user and you're not ready to take self-custody, you can have Bitcoin payments both on-chain and Lightning go to Strike. We have an Unchain integration. So if somebody wants to receive payments directly to their Unchained vault, they can do that. If somebody works with BTC Pay server, but they value our commerce templates, they can connect a BTC Pay to Zaprite. But importantly, we also connect fiat rails so that people can have this unified checkout, so they can leverage our tools to be able to actually incentivize and drive Bitcoin payments. So you can connect things like Square and Stripe and PayPal to access your fiat rails side by side with Bitcoin. And what this represents is we are building payments for Bitcoin without being a wallet. We are non-custodial inherently, but we support both non-custodial solutions and custodial solutions, because some Bitcoiners, even though they understand the value proposition of Bitcoin, need access to a custodial Lightning rail, or they're not ready to take self-custody. And importantly, having both is how we meet Bitcoiners where they're at. And each of those Bitcoiners, again, they want to receive Bitcoin, but even if, say, 98% of their revenue is in fiat, they have an incentive to drive Bitcoin. If we can deliver the fiat solutions side by side with Bitcoin, that's how we bridge this gap to historically where it's been all dollars to Bitcoin as a unit of account to more business owners accepting Bitcoin as payment. So where are we focused in terms of product? We have an API that's incredibly powerful. We're working with a number of companies that I would refer to as Bitcoin centric, that what our API allows people to do is build Bitcoin payments and fiat payments into their custom applications with one simple API. It reduces costs from their engineering, reduces maintenance costs, so they have to build less. They don't have to build out to all these different systems. They can build to one. And we enable both Bitcoin and fiat, and then there's one system for them to manage all their reporting in one place. So we built out our API about a year ago, worked through a number of feature adds, had test users, bugged, very much ready for prime time. We also focus on invoices. Invoices are a great tool where if there's a single business owner that understands Bitcoin and they build our customers, this is a very lightweight way to have a great payments experience. One of the things that we're working on actively that's not yet released, we have payment links, which are also used. We used, if you bought a ticket to this event, you use the Zaprite payment link. What we found was a lot of the places where there's overlap of willing buyers and sellers are Bitcoin events. People who come to a Bitcoin event are logical people to pay for Bitcoin. Those people used our payment links. That allowed us to see the success of it. And then we said, we need to build an actual native tickets. Even though you bought a ticket to this event, didn't actually issue a ticket. It just really provided a way for you to buy the ticket, and then we registered you for the event. But we want to dominate the market for Bitcoin events, not just because there's a logical overlap of willing buyers and sellers, but because it's strategic to us for distribution. If 90 of you went through the Zaprite payments experience and you're coming to Bitcoin events, then you will think, I want that for my business. I want to have this easy way to accept Bitcoin and fiat. So in the next few months, we'll be delivering a native ticket solution. We'll be working on key strategic connections, connecting more wallets, connecting more non-custodial wallets and custodial wallets, as well as potentially additional fiat processors and autopay. We have autopay supported in our API now. On the fiat side, we have a solution for how we're going to deliver autopay on Bitcoin. That will be a key priority over the next 12 months. But really, where is our strategic focus? Our strategic focus is on building a network effect. We focus on the power users, the Bitcoin-centric businesses, the Bitcoiners that understand Bitcoin. Buyers beget sellers. The more people that interface with Zaprite, the more customers we're going to get. That is what I would refer to as viral distribution. If every Bitcoiner going to a Bitcoin event is interacting with Zaprite, those are our logical next customers. One to many leads to more customers. But then what we ultimately want to do, and where our, I'd say, most strategic focus is creating a network effect that we ultimately want to connect buyers to sellers. Right now at Zaprite, we make it easy for people to accept Bitcoin. We don't have a relationship with a buyer. And that's important because you shouldn't have to have an app to pay a merchant. But if we can connect those buyers and in more than just a marketing distribution list, but in a way that actually improves the payment experience, we can do a service not just to the consumers of Bitcoin, but to the merchants that we support. So we're going to be working on applications to help bridge that gap, to create consumer applications to connect them with our merchants that are accepting Bitcoin. So with that, I don't know how I was doing on time. I'm usually the guy in the back giving hand signals, but I'll turn it to questions.